Welcome to a very special episode of TNT Live. Of course, there's Wyatt and I. Who cares? Hopefully, you guys. That'd be nice. But today we have the amazing Andy Lee from Alberta. She has joined us. So far, the big tech gods have not figured out that she's here, so we're safe for now. Andy has been unceremoniously thrown off of Twitter, thrown off of the banking system, thrown anything that is your right to have and free speech or freedom related, and he did well with it and then just completely chucked aside from it. So I think probably one of the best independent journalists in the country, and probably got you dinged for that. So we're very happy to have you with us, Andy. A lot of people might not know your background, your origin story. So if we can do the Batman Begins or the Andy Lee Begins version of that quickly. So what got you into this space?
Sure. Well, I was just a mom, right? I knew nothing about politics. I knew nothing about, geopolitics. I knew nothing about corporations, economics, anything. I was locked down. I was lonely. I got onto Twitter and I started researching. I was upset with what I was seeing in my country. I saw a backsliding of our democracy. So I started researching corruption. I sort of specialized in foreign corruption and corporate corruption in our government. And, I got really interested in geopolitics. One of the first things I did was I covered the Iranian election they were electing sort of the butcher of Tehran. Iranians decided to boycott their election en masse, and they were looking for help, and nobody would help them. So I joined a group of about 100 independents. We filmed sort of empty polling stations all over Iran, and to show that their election was a sham, that they didn't actually elect this mass murderer, right? Who was, sort of ordered the political execution of, maybe 10,000 prisoners in Iran. So I bundled it all up, sent it off to Stephen Harper, and Stephen Harper went and gave a beautiful speech about how he saw that the Iranian election was a sham and it was fraud. And I don't know if that was my work, but it was a very provocative thought that maybe I had a hand in it, right? And so I realized that I had this tool that I was using for nothing, and I could influence what happened in our government, and I could influence, the direction of our country if I use this and harness the power of social media. And it really sort of, that idea really took hold, and so I started to research things nonstop. That's all I do, right? I read reports, I read annual statements, I read financials. I do access to information acts. I'm always sort of digging, and I try to dig in places where other people won't dig. And I think that's what got me into trouble.
That's cool. I'll just add to that because it's funny, because one of the first videos that I did, like back in the day when I first started getting political, before the National Telegraph days, I had a stand-up comic, and I met another comic who was a political refugee from Iran. And we were doing comedy together, and then we decided to start doing stuff. And one of the first videos we did that got lots of views, that was really like a polished thing, was actually Iran 101, where we broke down the Iranian election system and how it works, and what is the Guardian Council, and how it was a breakdown of how the Iranian election was actually a sham. So it's funny you say that. That's kind of like both of how our political journey started.
Yeah, well, it was wild, and I knew nothing about Iran at the time, right? I didn't know. And the Iranian community, they're so incredible. It's such an incredible, tight-knit community. They're so supportive of one another. They're just wonderful people, and what's happened to them is just awful. And so I was so happy to help them. And it was so wild. I realized, I'm witnessing election fraud in real time. I'm actually witnessing real-time election fraud. I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
Right. And this is actually happening in the world. And so, I just thought, gosh, what can I do with my social media? And that's sort of where my journey really began. And that's when it really struck me that, I can do something with this, and I can do good, and I can help people with this if I really pour my heart and soul into it. And so, that's what I started doing.
That's awesome. So yeah, and then you became, over the last year is when I think everyone kind of really started to notice you, especially on Twitter, doing the Trudeau Foundation stuff. It was all blowing up. And then, you were one of the bigger voices at the beginning of the convoy covering it. And then, I think you got too good at your job or your hobby or whatever this was. and they got targeted. I mean, you had 30,000 Twitter followers, and there's a difference between 30,000 people is different for different people. Like sometimes you see people with 30,000 Twitter followers, they get 5 retweets on whatever they do, and you're like,
yeah, you get a lot of those people who've also been following 25,000 people, and they have 25,000 followers, but really a lot of people during the convoy seem to be sort of using your Twitter account as like a hub for new news on the ground. If you want to know something, like with the fake arson attack that happened, it was you and mostly Jonathan K, where people were signing on to Twitter to get news updates on what sort of the ridiculous narrative that was playing out at that apartment building, like blocks away from the Freedom Convoy. And that was probably, again, why they nuked the account. It was because not only was your account popular during the Freedom Convoy, it was like one of the first-hand sources on the ground where you could get a reliable piece of information about something going down on the ground, whereas a lot of people kind of would spread rumors because it was shocking and they could get a lot of retweets out of that. But when you said something, it was pretty reliable that it actually did happen, or something like it did happen.
And your stuff would get traction, which is what I was saying. It's like it wasn't one of those 30,000 accounts that did nothing. Like you punched above your weight class at 30,000 and growing. And it was a great place to get news. And then they,
Well, I mean, maybe a little bit too good, eh? I just wrote a story about, sort of being silenced. And so, yeah, I mean, I got a lot of followers over, a short period of time. I was just on Twitter over a year. So, and, it goes to show how hungry people are, that people latched onto me, how hungry they are for alternative news sources, right? And it really speaks to the downfall of legacy media and the death of journalism in Canada. That people would, because, I never went to school, right? I'm not associated with anybody except for myself, right? I'm a citizen journalist. I don't get paid or anything. So, it really goes to show you that, we need to do something about, how we report in Canada. And yeah, so I did try to be a voice for the convoy. I was very, very concerned about how that was all going to play out. I knew what sort of media would push, what they would be saying about these people. They didn't disappoint, right? They called them every bad name in the book. So I was very much concerned that they get sort of a free voice. And I think I became a very large problem because I did have, I didn't just have my following. I had some very big accounts who were retweeting me. So, when you've got someone like, Jordan Peterson, who's got millions of followers, retweeting me like he was, then all of a sudden, I'm reaching millions of people. And, and I was going very much against the narrative that they were trying to push, that these people were evil, awful, white supremacist, extremists, you heard it all. So, and I was very much trying to show that, no, this is not what most of them are about at all, right? Maybe there's a select few where there's some bad actors there. I'm sure that there were, right?
But once the movement gets above 1,000 people, it's statistically impossible not to have a bad person inside of it. And we make this exception during Black Lives Matter. We understand that, okay, everyone at that march can't be a good person, but one bad apple does not make the bunch. Yet when the sides are reversed, it's, Justin Trudeau's excoriating the people, saying, you stand with swastikas. Meanwhile, Ukraine, it's like, okay, if we're going to make this, it's just the stark hypocrisy that people see right away. Like if we're going to play the one person had a swastika one time at the Freedom Rally, okay, like let's deal with the fact that there's one neo-Nazi MP in the Ukrainian parliament. Doesn't mean the president is Jewish, but if we're going to play this game, right, it's gaslighting people when you play it on one issue and then completely ignore it the next day.
During the convoy, there was an anti-Semitic rally held in Toronto, right? So these are people who are openly calling for the death of Israelis. And nobody reported on that. Nobody at MSM reported on that, right? So I was like, well,
yeah, I've been in the middle of a lot of those rallies before.
Here. And so, yeah, that I think that was the problem, is that I really started to sort of push. And, I did debunk the arson hoax and Jonathan K.
Wait a minute. You're telling me the person with purple hair who had their pronouns on their jacket wasn't a trucker? Are you telling me this?
I saw a lot of things during my time in the convoy. I did not see any Kool-Aid colored hair. I'll tell you that much. So, and I was the first one who sort of went against Jim Elves and said, hold on here, Jim, because he jumped on this story. So he was supposed to be investigating it with Ottawa police. And I said, well, let's hold on here for a second. This wasn't reported to police. Apparently this is a mass murder plot. I've got other footage showing that they've been tampering with evidence in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, there's other footage from other people. Nobody's called the police until 2:30 in the afternoon. And these people are being retweeted by, global news and our mainstream media. And they're also linked to CBC. They've been in CBC news stories. And, and then all of a sudden, the Jussie Smollett of Canada, the story disappeared, right? I'm like, well, come on. There was a good Samaritan there who apparently put the fire out. That was the story. They put out the fire with snow. They stomped it out. So, this, this hero just walked by at 5 a.m, saw a fire that they shouldn't have been able to see from the road, went in, put it out, and then just disappeared into the night mysteriously. Let's think this through, right?
So somehow opened the door that was supposed to be taped shut or whatever, and then all the people who saw the fire in the hallway just decide. I loved the quote from Jonathan Kay when he was making fun of it, that the person saw the arsoner arsoning, asked them why they were arsoning the building. He said that it was because he said because he was part of the convoy, and then went back to his arsoning, and then the person just went back upstairs and to go to sleep in their soon to be immolated building. It
was great. No, it was beautiful, right? And then and so Jonathan retweeted me. So and so I think he retweeted me as the end of his story, right? When I was about the Good Samaritan who vanished into the night, right?
I would like to say, well, you two were doing a great job debunking it. I just saw the original story, and I'm like, I'm just calling this one's fake.
Yeah.
I'm just saying outright fake. I'll let someone. I'm like Andy and Wyatt and Jonathan. You're on it. It's fake news.
What's hilarious? Sorry, I was just saying, what's hilarious is that day two of the story, it was clearly nonsense. There was nothing that actually passed the smell test. And then CTV News' Glenn McGregor shows up like the hero in the day to try and save the story and says, well, I talked to the person at the front desk and they said it was totally true.
Yeah, I know. And, of course, everybody gets access to security footage when there's, a major crime in progress, right? I sent people to the building, right? I asked people in Ottawa, I said, hey, everybody, go tell me what's going on here. Is anybody even investigating this, right? There's no police tape. There's no nothing, there's nobody there. It's not roped off. So I'm like, and all of a sudden this viral story just went away and everybody happily spread it. And even our main media, Rachel Gilmore was spreading it. She was like, I know these people, they're good people, right? I'm like, well, I don't know if the people who spread the story were involved in it or not, but it's extremely suspicious that they come out with a Twitter thread. Who reports a crime, a mass murder arson plot on Twitter? Right. That'd be the last way that I would report it.
The arson investigator literally had to reach out on Twitter for details, but
this is how a fake news story is created.
Heard of it?
This is how a fake news story that fits the narrative is created. And you see this in all different things. I see this, there's a whole system for how to report fake news about Israel. There's a whole system to report fake news about the convoy. And it works the same way. Is the first person who goes in misreports it. It's whether it's the Clouts thing or this arson. And as soon as you say it, well, then everyone else can pile on and retweet it. Then the first person, they're the only ones with the responsibility that needs to correct it. But once they correct it, well, then no one else actually needs to correct it because then they can say, well, I got it from the original guy.
Wasn't so suspicious. I was just going to say, in this case, it was so suspicious, too, that the Twitter thread comes out, liberal MPs are retweeting it, all these journalists from the mainstream media are retweeting it, and then it takes them a good solid day and a half since the Twitter thread is published before they even write a singular story on it or cover it on the news, as if they all knew that this was complete garbage, but they're kind of convincing themselves it could have happened. Whereas that's why you see Glenn McGregor kind of showing up on day two to kind of keep throwing doubt on the people debunking the story. It's like they desperately want it to be true, despite knowing it's not true.
Well, I mean, even Mercedes Stevenson went. So, and I really respect Mercedes actually. And she was like, it wasn't a hoax. I was like, no, Mercedes, you know what? Something happened there. But the question is, do we really believe that? Because I mean, I was the one that froze the frame and put out the truckers have got purple hair.
Yeah.
Let's find him, right? Let's go get him. This should be really easy to find, because I'll tell you, I didn't see anybody with purple hair, and I spent 2 weeks with these people. So, I mean, I was like, let's get him, right? Everybody go look for this purple haired trucker. And so I was like, no, it wasn't a complete hoax. Something happened here. But, did it happen the way that it was presented? No, absolutely, right? That was a complete lie. So, I mean, some people seem to get away with, outright lying on social media. And I called out his friend who had also somehow seen the security footage. Apparently the security dude was a good guy and just showed it to them. And so once I said, Sheila Gunn Reid jumped on it, and she said that she was going to go out and investigate. And I said, make sure you check this guy out who's tampering with evidence before the police are called. And he promptly locked his account. So
he also had a hammer and sickle on his profile picture, so that wasn't exactly a big shock. Even the guy who originally put out the Twitter
in the rallies, right, with the hammer and sickle flag.
Yeah, the guy who originally posted the Twitter thread, that guy as well was the person who was complaining about the convoy for the past week, and then suddenly he just pretends like he's shocked that the convoy people did. Like the post he did the day before is, someone better do something to get rid of these people, get these people out of the city, and then lo and behold, like the best story drops into his lap that could get the convoy out of the city. It was also really funny that supposedly a bunch of people were like someone tried to immolate a building and kill everyone inside the building, yet his first priority is getting the trucker convoy out of the city.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's get real here. And I mean, even Mayor Jim Watson, he went on TV and he said it. I was like, I can't believe that this is actually being broadcast on, our primetime news, that Jim Watson is saying that truckers did this, right? There's no indication.
Jagmeet Singh too.
Right? Like there's no indication that happened. So, I mean, and that's, I mean, this is sort of the standards that we're looking at nowadays, is that somebody can actually put out a story on Twitter and nobody fact checks it. And our politicians and even our legacy media just ran with it. And nobody looked too hard at it because it really massaged their confirmation bias. It was what they wanted to hear. And so that was my purpose of being there, was to try to, stop things like that, and put the brakes on them before they gained traction. And well, we all know where it got me, right?
Yeah, it got you kicked off Twitter, and then it got like, okay, so we can go back to the Twitter thing, but I think the more pressing story is, like, because the Twitter and the social media stuff has been around forever, they froze people's bank accounts without, and we had Tom Marazzo on a couple of weeks ago. They froze his bank accounts without, he doesn't have a criminal record. He didn't have any criminal charges laid against him. There was no warrant. But this is an excuse. He was at least an organizer of the convoy, for whatever it's worth. He organized the convoy. You were not an organizer of the convoy. You were a journalist there covering it, and you got hit. Your accounts got hit. Your credit cards got messed with, Coinbase, PayPal. So I think tell people a bit about what you've gone through outside of the social media banning, just the punishment you've received from the financial system for just being there.
Yeah, well, it's all very mysterious. So I was in Ottawa and I tried to make an e-transfer, and it was seized by the fraud department, and my online banking was locked. And subsequent transfers were also seized. So I haven't tried to use it since February 28th was the last time I tried to make a transfer. So I tried to make a transfer today for $300 to my babysitter. And I was told that I was not allowed to make that transaction. So obviously they've sort of, removed my ability to make e-transfers at this point. So, and they've also decreased my limit on my debit card. So that's all, sort of gone on behind the scenes. So, I mean, do we know for a fact that I was targeted by the Emergencies Act? No, that's popular opinion. But I think that in light of the fact that sort of this has still continued, I've had enough. So I did have a call today with the Justice Center. We are going to start asking questions. I don't think it matters really whether or not the government, put me on a list and said, crash your banking or whatever, because the reaction that my bank had was in reaction to the Emergencies Act, right? So regardless, it has a government root. They would never have done that to me. I'm a very good customer. They would never have done that to me, without that sort of guidance from the government or that permission from the government. There would have been no reason for them to do that to me. I could be one of those people who was flagged for possible fraudulent activity, and now those flags, it would seem, continue to exist. So I did try to shift over to PayPal as a payment method if I wanted to pay people. I've got bank accounts linked and credit cards linked, and PayPal has informed me that I will no longer be able to use their system. And I also have a Coinbase account. I didn't have a lot of money in it, but I had some money in it. And I'm no longer allowed to purchase cryptocurrency with my bank account or with any of my credit cards. So we're going to get to the bottom of it. Basically, I've had enough. Like I said, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people believe, and I have talked to some of our parliamentarians. They believe that it's possible that I was targeted under the Emergencies Act. I haven't asked anybody directly. I'm going to leave that for legal counsel to do at this point in time to figure out. But again, regardless, I don't think that the bank would have done this were I not in Ottawa, and were the government not directing banks to be, on the lookout for fraudulent activity and to be, seizing bank accounts in the first place. I don't think it would have happened. So that's sort of my feeling about all that.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I'll say, otherwise, I'll just say a quick sense is you're absolutely right. This wouldn't happen. There clearly is some sort of level of government, like the government enabled this, but also the banks. The banks should never have gone along with this. You cannot ask anyone, especially in this audience, who probably has some heterodox anti-government view somewhere. I can't ask anyone in this audience to trust their money is going to be safe in the banks when the banks just, the government says, okay, freeze bank accounts, which bad government, but also bad banks for saying, okie doke, yoink, 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 that's your money. You can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. It's beyond insane.
I mean, none of them questioned it, right? They all just fell into line. So, I mean, there's really not a divide between our government and our bank right now. I mean, the bank has become the long arm of the government, in nobody sort of standing up and saying, no, wait a minute, this is a private institution, right? This isn't a public institution, right? Yeah. I mean, they're federally regulated, but I mean, they're still private institutions, right? So, I mean, you would have thought that somebody in the bank would have said, no, actually, these are our clients, right?
Even just out of a sense of self-preservation.
It's not for business, right? Yeah. It's not good for business.
No.
I mean, I'm certainly going to be withdrawing my money out of my bank. Right.
I'm there too. And we'll go one further. I guess this is a great time for a commercial break. This episode of TNT Live is sponsored by the National Telegraph itself. So Wyatt and I and our cryptocurrency columnist, Neil Mackenzie Suter, we're going down to Bitcoin Miami next month. The reason is, and we're putting a link to a Give, Send, Go that we've started to sort of fund this trip to Miami to learn about Bitcoin, because I was on the ground in Ottawa, and what I saw is, I don't understand really how Bitcoin works, but the Bitcoin got through to the truckers. And the government has declared that Bitcoin is frozen, but that's kind of like the Office scene where Michael Scott declares bankruptcy. The government just said, we declare Bitcoin is frozen. It's not frozen. It still works, right? So the Bitcoin works.
The only thing they can do is they can go after the smaller sort of transaction apps like
Coinbase.
Coinbase.
You're reading the commercial with your technicality.
I'm sorry.
Right? This is okay. So we're going there to fix Wyatt's social skills. 1, we're going to learn about Bitcoin. 2, we're going to get Wyatt a girlfriend in America. 3, we realize that we need to be able to fight the banks. They're coming after your money. And Wyatt and I don't really understand enough about how to advise you around Bitcoin or whatever. So we realize with digital ID, digital currency, all this stuff, the bank's going crazy. We need to go and get up to speed and learn what the hell Bitcoin is. And also, again, with Coinbase being annoying, how can you safely invest in Bitcoin? What is it? What is cryptocurrency? we want to be able to give you the answers to these questions. It's an expensive conference. We're going to try and fund it. So if you want to support alternative media, you want to support the National Telegraph, there's a link to our Give, Send, Go where we are going to go and we're going to learn what the hell is Bitcoin so we can come and tell you what the hell is Bitcoin and how to avoid the banks using Bitcoin. So we don't really know those answers yet, but we're going to learn next month. Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Andy, for sitting through the first ever commercial on TNT Live.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
So
sorry.
where do we go from this?
Back to what I was going to mention too is that this is why it's legal theory. It's not Andy Lee's theory. I'm just going to put something out there. The only reason I think that you were probably targeted by the government, where it wasn't like, of course, they weren't like screaming, get Andy Lee in the PMO office, like Daniel wrote in one of his recent articles about it. Yeah, like that would have been more theatrical, I guess, and fun. But like, you know, like subtly, like a piece of paper hits the bank's desks and saying, yeah, this person might have had something to do with the Freedom Convoy and you should ruin them, is the fact that you were driving around from Toronto or to Ottawa or whatever with Mark Lipinski in the same vehicle. And he was also targeted by Twitter. And I'm not sure if he was targeted by the banks. But the fact that there seems to be a lumping in of you and him at the same time made it seem like someone was making an association on the ground that you two should be targeted, despite there being no easy way of them knowing that you were like associated with each other and in the same vehicle.
Yeah, so that was a curious sort of plot twist. So the day that I got suspended, the moment that I got suspended, you know, Mark texted me and said, oh my gosh, my Twitter's been suspended. And I said, yeah, me too. So, you know, we did, I don't know Mark very well. We met during some rallies, actually with the Iranian community against the IRGC in Toronto. You know, we're not affiliated or anything. I just said, you know, I'm going to Ottawa. You know, I'm picking up political prisoner Salman Sima. You know, do you want to ride? Because he doesn't have a car. So, you know, he's young. So I just thought, and so he's like, yeah, sure, I'll come, right? Let's go see what it's all about. So he was in my car. So it was sort of funny that we got suspended from Twitter, both of us, at the same moment on the same day.
So, folks out there, if you're looking for a ride and you want to keep your social media accounts, do not carpool this woman.
Yeah, basically, right? And you know what was great is that I took Salman Sima, so he's fantastic. So he was a political prisoner in Iran. So we're good friends. We've met in Toronto a couple of times, and he actually went on to be on Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
it's great. So it was really, really funny. So I'm really glad that you know, he got to do that and he got his voice heard. You know, on such a large scale. That was really good. So that was a little bit, you know, that warmed my heart as I was being silenced. You know, he was getting sort of this massive audience. So, you know, it was a little bit of retribution. I felt, you know, good about that. I was like, yeah, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the only way to protect you from being silenced while you're Andy, if you're a Muslim refugee, you can ride with Andy. If you're, you know, someone named Mark Lipinski, you know, stay away from her car. The car of the banning car, the car of doom. That's the thing. Yeah. It's none of it adds up. Like two getting nicked at the same time. You know, you didn't like. I am 99.9% confident you didn't violate any of the terms of services or the agreements.
They didn't say I did, right? I mean, they won't say anything. They're just avoiding me. I'm like that. I wish she would just go away.
Why won't this lady just accept that we've, you know, why won't she just go away and stop doing what she's good at? Why won't she just join a, you know, a intersectional, you know, cut half your head, turn the other half purple, and then start yelling about the patriarchy? Then we'll let you back on.
They've ruled on Mark's account. So they've upheld his permanent suspension. But he had other accounts that he was using. So there might be a reason for that, but this was my only account. There's been fake accounts that have popped up and I've reported them all. You know, as they've popped up, I've reported them to Twitter and asked that they be taken down. So, you know, he may have violated the evasion, but I didn't, right? And I think that we're sort of in like a standoff. I think Twitter's waiting for me to try to make a new account so that they can be like,
get yourself banned.
So I'm not going to do it, right? I'm gonna wait for my appeal. So I'm waiting for my appeal for over a month now. And I mean, they're really in a hard place. You know, if they, you know, uphold my permanent ban, then there's going to be a backlash. If they reinstate my account, then that's also going to blow up on them. So, you know, I mean, I think that they're just sort of not going to look at it maybe indefinitely. But I mean, I should be entitled to an appeal. Everybody else is, right? I mean, they say that I'm entitled to an appeal. So I submitted it. And I keep resubmitting it, right? And I keep asking them, why haven't you heard my appeal yet? You've heard other people's. So why not mine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's you kicked us a rather large horn in this. I mean, before the convoy, let's talk about what you were like before the convoy. You did some of the best reporting I've ever seen on the Trudeau Foundation, and its connections and who's funding it, and this CCP operative, BlackRock. I mean, it's kind of hard to keep track of all the names, but you just did a really good job of getting after the Trudeau Foundation, which is, for our Americans watching, it's like the Clinton Foundation on Canadian steroids. You think that thing's corrupt? It's one of those. Oh, look at the foreign funding of the Trudeau Foundation, and he's in office. Kabing. So yeah, if you want to talk a bit about your work covering the most wonderful charity of all time, which does so much charity. I mean, who here hasn't been an orphan helped by the Trudeau Foundation? I mean, so.
Well, I mean, it's mostly a program that, and they do some good work. They do a lot of scholarship programs. That's kind of their thing. But I mean, most of these people are sort of, the elites that they seem to be helping, and then they go on to, get positions in government and things like that. Right. So, yeah, but I mean, I did question, I realized that over the pandemic, I just said, donations to the Trudeau Foundation increased by 500% during the course of the pandemic. And, the rules have been changed. Trudeau changed the rules for not-for-profits, which is what the Trudeau Foundation falls under, so that, they're not subjected to the same audit rules as charities are. So, I mean, but let's look at $20, donations to truckers.
Yeah, that's the maddening thing is
the interesting thing about the Trudeau Foundation, sorry to cut you off.
No, go for it.
Is that they had their own COVID committee. They had their own COVID impact committee. And so, they had these members on the committee, and the head was, her name was Vardit Ravinsky. And so Vardit was a expert who was on CBC all the time. And some of the things she said were, these people should be disallowed from accessing society. They should only be allowed access to food and medication. They should be discluded from society. So she's saying this about unvaccinated people. And this is the Trudeau Foundation. So, and she's a director with the Trudeau Foundation. She's on the COVID impact committee, and she's pushing, Justin Trudeau's narrative, basically. And CBC is then giving her a platform to say all these terrible things, right? I mean, I don't care how bad you are. You don't deserve any of that. Who says you should only get access to food and medication? Right? I mean,
you get sued if you did that to a prisoner.
That's wild, right? So yeah, I know that basically is that's saying that basically these people should be jailed. And she actually did bring up that maybe they should be jailed, right? Or maybe they should be fined. So I mean, this is what the Trudeau Foundation was doing with their COVID impact committee, and all of a sudden donations are pouring in. So I'm like, well, I mean, who's funding this? Who's funding this committee? What are these donations being used for? Are they being used?
All right, confession time. It was me.
Are they being used?
I gave hundreds of millions of dollars to them. My bad, everyone. Mea culpa.
And the other weird thing about the Trudeau Foundation, and most people don't know this, is that the board of directors, the executive, is actually chosen by the Ministry of Innovation, Economics, and Science Development Canada. So the ICD. So the ICD actually, so that would be Francois-Philippe Champagne right now. He actually chooses, and this is right in the groundwork of how the foundation runs. Yeah. He actually chooses board members. So 6 members of the board are exclusively held to be appointed by the government. What the hell kind of an organization does that? And
that's literally how the Iranian government runs.
Well, the funny thing about what you're saying,
this was okay. Hold on, sorry, just let me finish. Sorry. This was okay when Justin Trudeau wasn't prime minister, but he's supposed to be removed from the foundation. But yet he appoints a minister, right, who then appoints people to his board of directors.
That's literally how the Iranian government works.
Right. No, so I'm like, well, what's going on here, guys? Is this not a massive conflict of interest?
I was just thinking, like, that kind of like throws the whole We scandal thing on its head, in the sense that, like, everyone's like wondering, like, is the We scandal too close, or the We charity too close to the Trudeau Foundation and the government? I'm like, they're literally, the Trudeau Foundation is directly tied to the government. So yes, any money you're giving to them, you're giving to a government, a proto-government or a governmental organization. So yes, like, yeah, like it kind of fast tracks the entire scandal. Is like, is this corrupt for Trudeau's mother to be taking money into the Trudeau Foundation for speaking? Yes, as the We charity paying the government to then give them a contract.
If you have to ask the question, you probably shouldn't be doing it. That's the simple thing, right? If you have to ask, should I be doing this? You know what? The safest answer is always just no, don't do it.
But we live in a society now, when it's run by Trudeau's Liberals, where they know that there will be no investigation from the CBC, CTV, Global News, National Post. Like, this is what happens when you pay the media $600 million and another $60 million before the election, and then who knows how much, $1.5 billion to the CBC every year. This is what happens when the government's allowed to pay private media companies, is they can just merge themselves with a Trudeau Foundation. It literally has his name on it. It's literally called the Trudeau Foundation. He is Justin Trudeau. He is in office. They appoint the same ministers. They are open about their connections, and they're confident that no one in the media will look into it. And this is why you have to put in hate speech laws, because you have to say that Andy Lee violated Bill C-10 or C-11 or C-36, and he was hate speeching about the Trudeau.
Oh, and you're doing that. The pathetic thing about our legacy media too is you're doing this borderline for free, yet the person who can't even be fired from their jobs because they're being basically paid to do nothing and get no views on the articles they write doesn't have the time to put in like even a fraction of the effort to even just draw these connections and write an article. I guarantee you, the vast majority of people who read legacy media do not know that the Trudeau Foundation is directly tied into the government. And they just think it's something like, at least the Clinton Foundation isn't part of like the State Department. Like that, it's ridiculous to think about.
Because in America, they know the Republicans will go ballistic, and Fox News will cover the fact if Hillary Clinton declares herself queen of the world and openly directs like, hey, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, Bahrain, everyone, money here, money here. Like she has to do it quietly off TV behind the scenes, whereas Trudeau can lead the procession, wear a crown, and be like, hold the money bag open and stop by the Chinese consulate and literally knock on the door, and they just throw coins, and then he's off to the next one, like Canada.
Well, I mean, one of my last articles I wrote, so I went on a witch hunt for the Trudeau Foundation. I did this in retribution for what they did to the trucker donors. I was very, very upset to see this witch hunts, and them mercilessly pursuing people who had donated to the convoy. And these people, some of them lost their jobs. So I went on my own witch hunt, and I looked into, the accounts that were held in Justin Trudeau's blind trust. And so the main one that held the estate at some time of Pierre Elliott Trudeau was actually dissolved for non-compliance with federal regulations. So I called ISCD Canada and asked them what happened. And they said that they have no clue, right? It was just dissolved for non-compliance. And so that article, so my articles normally get some of them get 2,000 views, some of them get 4,000 views. That one's at about 9,000 views, and that went up very, very quickly. So that's bigger than my usual audience. So, that told me that was being circulated. And I was off Twitter at this point. Mm-hmm. So that told me that was being viewed, and it was being viewed outside of my normal circle, right? People were looking very, very hard at that. And the other weird thing about that is that the company that held Pierre Elliott Trudeau's trust, it was actually held by a lawyer. So, but the lawyer only had it for about a month. Then she signed it over to Alexandre Trudeau, right? Justin Trudeau's brother. And Justin Trudeau has a shareholder company that's invested in this company, and it's supposed to be in a blind trust. But my question is, if his brother is the controlling director and the sole director of this company that Justin Trudeau's blind trust is invested in, is this really a blind trust anymore? because this isn't held by a third party. This is held by his brother. He's not a legal entity. So potentially, is this giving him inside workings and inside views into what's going on in his father's trust account, right? So,
And like, what are Alexandre Trudeau's qualifications? If people are wondering, well, he used to make propaganda videos for the Islamic Republic of Iran.
he did.
So that is your corporate experiences. Oh, I made a documentary about why we should give Iran nuclear weapons, and then I made another documentary about why Israel is very evil. Does that qualify you to run a blind trust? Who knows?
Well,
I'd say
You
no.
also should be
but-
putting the blind trust in the ownership of someone who isn't easily manipulated. You like right there, you can name like 17 different things that you could offer Alexander Trudeau to get influence.
Yeah, so so people were definitely looking at that. So I don't know who was looking at it, but it definitely wasn't my usual viewership. So yeah, that's sort of a mystery is what happened to that account. And I mean, regardless, the optics are really bad, right? I mean, we're supposed to comply with federal regulations, but you guys don't have to. You guys don't have to file your annual returns like the rest of us schmucks do. I mean, come on here. Like, you guys are multimillionaires. I think that you could keep up with. I mean, there's legal ways to dissolve the corporation, right? All you have to do is file for a dissolution.
But then you don't get all the money. Andy, come on. So I'll give a second commercial. This show is brought to you by Andy Lee herself. I just put her website in the chat. So if you guys want to go bookmark it, where can you find Andy's work now that she's been nuked off Twitter? AndyLeeVNA.com. Link is in the chat. So if you want to bookmark that website to get any of our articles, go there. And if you're fascinated by any of the things that she's been covering, like I am, you're definitely going to want to bookmark that one because I don't think you're going to kick yourself off your own website.
Yeah,
Though I may be wrong.
People used to do that back in the day, where they used to actually like bookmark all the news sites that they followed, and I think people have to go back to that because I think the problem with things like Facebook and Twitter is that you only ever see the biggest articles, and it's never the most important articles. And Andy, you're all like, I don't even say that you're not even part of independent media, you're part of like micro media. You have like a specific issue, and that you are going to dig down onto that issue and inform people as much as humanly possible. So it's like, if you want to know about the Trudeau Foundation, you're not going to be able to go to anyone else but Andy. So that would be a great thing for people to like actually bookmark so that they can keep reading into this sort of stuff, because anyone else who's going to talk about it is not going to have the credibility.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was going to say, we were talking about U.S. lawmakers, so I've contacted a few of them because we all know that I broke the story on the sale of lithium mines to Chinese state entity Zijin. It's a mining conglomerate. So that lithium mine sale and why it wasn't subjected to a security review, that was my story. And I pressured Francois Philippe Champagne to subject it to a national security review, and he refused to. I harped on it and I harped on it. And of course, now we've got a letter from U.S. lawmakers, Congress people, congressmen, congresswomen. So they have written to, several members of Congress. They've written to, the State Department. They've written to the Defense Department, the Interior Ministry. And so they are wanting now all communications between Canada and the United States regarding why the sale occurred and why it wasn't subjected to a national security review. And I'm really excited to see how this pans out because, like you said, these people don't fool around, right? They intend to get answers. So they've requested all of those documents. So I've written to some of these lawmakers to let them know that, yes, I was the one that broke the story. Yes, there's a lot more to it. A lot of funny things happened. Right before the sale, BlackRock invested heavily in the company. They bought 13 million shares. And as well, the stakeholders before the sale were informed that it would not be subjected to a national security review. So how did they get that information? Why are they privy to insider information from ISED Canada? How did they get that? How did they know that?
Yeah, I mean, this is
known it before the sale went through.
Yeah.
So I raised the question of was this insider trading, right? And the other funny thing is that if you look at BlackRock, and so these lawmakers were also questioning Biden as to whether Biden knew about the sale. And I said, well, yes, Biden did, because here's my tweet. I told him, right? I tagged him in. So yes, they were aware. But the other funny thing is that Biden's got a lot of connections in his administration to BlackRock. Like, let me tell you, that's a whole show in and of itself. So the question is, my question was, did we not subject this mine to a review because we've got a mega corporation? I mean, this corporation has more, assets under management than our GDP, and then a lot of countries' GDP, right? I mean, they've got 10 trillion under management.
Yeah.
So, you don't really cross this company. So those are some interesting facets. So I'm hoping that these lawmakers get back to me. So I've reached out to the representatives and written some letters, and I'd like to hopefully work with them. And I've got a little bit of what I've done saved that I was able to retrieve, some screenshots that were left over from Twitter, in the aftermath. And so I'm hoping to sort of share that with them and talk to them and get some answers. And it'll be really eye-opening once these communiques come out about why the sale was allowed to proceed. So that's another hornet's nest I kicked.
Yeah, you're pretty good at those. As someone who, as a hornet's nest kicker, as a nest kicker myself, and
I'm winning. I'm definitely winning, but I'm getting stung in the process, right?
Yep, that's it's kind of how these things work. But someone's got to do it. Someone's got to do it. That's the thing. Is it's amazing that Canada is basically insider trading on all these things. I was just with a friend whose parents got subcontracted on the green energy stuff. Every green energy contract is insider trading and a government handout to their friends. The purpose of green energy is not to save the planet. The purpose of green energy is to funnel money to your supporters in a way that you can market as saving the planet, and then bring your supporters in front of a camera, say, we bribe these people, but look, we're also great people. We care about the planet. Because they were saying things like, okay, so these green energy contracts from a few years ago under Trudeau government, in order to get them, there was a small window it was you had to apply within let's say 12 hours of it being released. There was a 12-hour thing of it being released and when the contracts are made. So the only people who could even get the contracts is the people who could fill all the qualifications. But they didn't release the qualifications, let's say, till midnight, and then it closed at noon. So not only did you have to know beforehand, you also had to have the money to buy an entire legal team to put together 20 pages that properly jump through all the hoops, because it couldn't have been done by a legal team in 12 hours, because that was the thing. So you had to have prior knowledge, the money, and a legal team to go get that, then to know when and where to submit it at the right time. And then you got these then you got the green energy contracts. It's the same thing with there was a former Liberal MP who got the PPE contracts during COVID, and he had just created his company a week before it. And he was just an MP, he didn't know anything, but he got the contracts to get all the PPE, which was what I went ballistic on that. But again, the mainstream media didn't really care for more than a second.
We can look at Thornhill Medical, right? So Thornhill Medical got the ventilator contracts, the ventilators that were never created or needed. And they're actually owned by a Chinese company called Yonghua Capital. So that's a story that I'm working on. Talking about green energy, though, I'm working on another story. I'll give you guys a little taste of it. So one of the richest women in the world is called Annette Verschuren, right? She was CEO of Home Depot. So she got out of Home Depot and she got into green energy. And she started making prototypal battery storage projects. So she sold one of these projects to the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And they're partnered with the Six Nations, Grand River Six Nations. And so, here's the thing. She's one of the richest, most powerful people in the world. Trudeau's plugged her. They've patted each other's backs. She accompanied him with meetings to Trump. Katie Telford organized these meetings. And so now she's getting green energy projects funded by Canadian taxpayers through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And not only that, they're taking Indigenous funding. Now, here's the kicker. I've talked to Parker Gallant about this a lot, and I did a lot of reading, and it was really, I don't understand a lot of these, energy efficiency as well as other people. But everything that I've shown shows that this energy project, so it's supposed to relieve the grid, is one of the most expensive methods to distribute energy. And Parker is very, very smart, and he agrees with me. So not only have we got this project going, but it also seems like it's, it's another Ontario energy disaster waiting to happen. It's going to deliver energy that's more expensive. It's been given to one of the richest women in the world. And the kicker is this Six Nations doesn't even have clean drinking water. All right.
Let's see.
So, I mean, this is our government and how it works in a nutshell. Is it illegal? No. Is it right? No, it's not right. You know what? And the other thing is, this is a prototypal. This is one of the first projects of its kind. So, I mean, why are we prototyping one of the richest women in the world's projects with taxpayer-funded money that may end up costing us more in electricity? And then we're getting First Nations on board and taking their funding as well. And these people have to boil their water to drink it.
Again, because this is why green energy drives me crazy. Like, they made a movie, the left finally made a movie about this 2 years ago, and 2 years ago in 2020, they Planet of the Humans, which was produced by Michael Moore. As I say, the alternate title, everything Daniel said about green energy the last 10 years was right, we're sorry for doubting him, was a bit too long and they had to change it. But if you watch the movie, they break down that green energy is powered by fossil fuels. The only reason we still need coal is to build windmills and solar panels. Like, that's the only function of coal these days. Like, yes, coal is good for plants and you can have it, but like natural gas is so much more efficient than coal. Like, we can get rid of coal-fired plants if we just deregulate the energy industry, go to nuclear and natural gas. And okay, there, you've ended the coal plants if coal is so evil. But the only reason we need coal, capital NEED, is to build these effing windmills and solar panels that like break down in 20 years and they can't even be recycled because they just become toxic after that. And the amount of energy needed to build one of these fucking windmills. By the way, if I ever have a mental breakdown, you'll find me in Ontario kicking a windmill, screaming out Kathleen Wynne. But the energy needed to build a windmill, you don't even get the energy back, like that you save hypothetically on it, like after the time it's already degraded, and then the cost of the environment of it degrading, and then the other fact that like we don't even have the battery stored. So in Ontario, the craziest thing is for every kilowatt hour of energy produced by wind or solar, it's mandated that you must use that energy on the grid because it's clean and green and whatever. So in order to store it, because we don't have efficient battery storage for green energy, you need 1 kilowatt hour of natural gas or nuclear to even store the kilowatt hour of wind. So every wind energy, 1 joule of energy from wind energy, you need to then use 1 joule of natural gas just to store that to then get it to the grid. So it's not even producing any energy because we need the same amount of energy just to get it there. It drives me absolutely bananas. And
well, it's not producing more. It's literally doubling the amount of energy. The whole Russia-Ukraine situation would not be happening if Germany and other countries understood this.
By the way, Susan, where is your town? Where are these windmills? Bring me my axe. We're going. Like, I hate these things.
Yeah,
I hate the windmills.
I probably have to go soon, everybody. So how do we want to finish this off?
Except we've done almost an hour. That's great.
I'm going to get my children. So yeah,
Andy has children. Those are smaller humans. Sorry for Kamala Harris listening. Andy is a human woman who made smaller humans, and they are related to her. It's little kind of like.
Yeah, they're Chinese. They're my little Chinese people kinds. So.
There you go. So yeah, we like to give the guests the last thing, and we will definitely bring you back for people. Excellent stuff. You have an open invitation. We'll be in touch. You can come back anytime you want. So Andy, you fought the banks, you fought Twitter. We'll let you have last word and make an appeal to the people. Thank you, everyone. Please subscribe, click all the buttons. It's the internet. You know how to click buttons. Click the buttons. It helps us out. Andy, take it away.
Yeah, I guess, in closing, I guess when we're looking at online hate and all these things that our government talks about, and they talk about how social media is this ugly, torrid place, and there's hate rampant and they have to harness it. And a lot of governments are putting this out, right? And the United Nations is putting this out. The WEF is putting this out. And, they're saying that they need to get control over this. So, when I looked at my account, I looked at people from all over the world who came together, right? From all different walks of life, all different cultures, all different races, and they all came together. and contributed. And, some of my threads had over 1 million views. That's pretty incredible. And they were translated into, 8 different languages. Something somebody just retweeted for me the other day was translated into Hebrew.
Lovely.
So yeah. So I mean, it just, to me, that was the purpose of social media, was for people to come together and, bridge differences and bridge cultural differences and get to know each other and understand each other and learn from each other. And so, I accomplished that, right? I overcame all the ugliness and the hate and all that bad stuff that was out there. And, to me, what happened was a huge success, right? It was a success showing that we could work together and understand each other. There isn't this huge racial divide that's, unbridgeable, that everybody harps on. It's not this boundary that can't be overcome, because I saw it overcome in real time. So to have that canceled.
Yeah. And it's,
I mean, that
and
was supposed to be the purpose of these platforms. And, so we achieved the goal. So, and it wasn't just my work, when I started a big thread, it was, people would get really excited and they'd start digging and they'd help me, and they'd contribute, and they'd go looking at political donations and lobbies and financials. And so, I think that's why everything hurt and there was such huge backlash, is they didn't just cancel me, they canceled us, right? They didn't just cancel my stories, they canceled our stories. That was our work. And on that note, I've talked to the Justice Center, and because this was my original content and our original content, we are considering launching a lawsuit against Twitter Canada under federal copyright laws to retrieve my own creative content, because I am a content creator and they've seized it and it's mine and I want it back. So that's the end of the show, guys.
that's the end. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everyone who supported Andy. Thanks to everyone who bookmarked her website. Thanks to everyone who clicked on our Give, Send, Go and helping. If you want more from Andy, again, her website is there. Hopefully she gets her Twitter back. You're on Getter, right? You're on Getter. So, I mean, yeah, we just posted her website again. I'm sure you can find her from her website there, andyleevna.com. Andy, thank you so much for coming on TNT Live. And again, you're invited back anytime you want. Just reach out and we are happy to have you, unless you get thrown away to some sort of gulag in the Wuhan province.
I'm half still waiting my arrest warrant, to be honest. But thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
If you do that, we'll live stream outside the jail. Unless we get put in together, then we can do a little live stream in the jail.
Thank you.
As cellmates. I'll pretend to be a woman. I'll say I'm a woman. We could do this in Canada now, and then we could be cellmates and do a live stream.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that. Yeah, let's hope it doesn't come to that. But like I said, I'm half expecting a knock on my door any day now. So anyways, yeah, thank you everybody for your support and all the viewers who tuned in, and thank you for the articles that you've written. And yeah, I'm looking forward to working together more, right?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks everyone for being here. Good night. Oh, and by the way, last reminder, everyone. This Thursday, special episode of TNT Live again. We're doing 2 this week. On this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're gonna have Jim and Belinda Kalaharos of the New Blue
7:30 actually.
Sorry,
I have changed the time. It's 7:30 Eastern, 5:30.
Okay, they have a lot to talk about. So this Thursday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, Jim, Belinda Kalaharos talking about Bill 67, the New Blue Party, and stop how we're going to stop all this social justice nonsense in Ontario. So if you want to watch that, we'll find Wyatt and I again on Thursday with Jim and Belinda Kalaharos talking about New Blue and how to fight woke nonsense in Ontario. So hopefully we will see you there. Thanks everyone, and good night.